So, for those who aren't keeping track, this is the white panel. It's a micro conversation, but really in that context, if you think about it, it's a macro conversation. Mm-hmm. Okay. I should own my part of this, by the way. I do live in Brooklyn. I'm a white lesbian with a kid and a white partner, which means I live in
Park Slope.
Thank you for playing. There are zoning ordinances, people. So, and you live in Crown Heights.
Yes.
And I guess my first question is, not to project too much onto you, but as a white person walking around in a rapidly hyper-gentrifying Brooklyn, do you just walk around in a constant state of existential guilt?
No. I used to. And I kind of, struggle a lot every day thinking about like, oh my God, I'm walking down the street and are they looking at me? What are they thinking? And then I realized people
what it's like to be black now a little bit.
Maybe, but I'm like, people have their own problems, like Ms. Bailey, they've got bigger things to think about than me personally.
Do you think of yourself as, you it's interesting, this section, this micro conversation was called Gentrification for the Win. And you said you were uncomfortable with that title. Why?
Yeah, it makes it sound as though gentrification is like this, like, wow, it's great and positive, and I don't think that there's really like kind of like it makes it sound like almost like a moral weight to it, like it's a good thing, or it could be a bad thing, and I think it's a thing that is happening and it's very systemic.
But it's sort of not good, neither good nor bad?
I think it's neither good nor bad. I think that with the way that residential patterns are working in the city, the way the economy of the city is working, it's like gentrification is being favored by all of the systems, and it's not really great, but it's not necessarily bad. Like my own part in it, I feel like gentrification for the win is like, I personally like have benefited from gentrification. So I have complicated feelings about it.
Do you think of yourself as a gentrifier?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me, going back to the previous conversation, not to pick on Boaz, but he's not in the room, so it seems fair. No, but Boaz also talked about systems, right? I said it's sort of not, the onus isn't necessarily on the individual developer in terms of affordable housing, but it's just the system. Mm-hmm. And it strikes me, by the way, again, gentrifier, right here, okay. But it strikes me you're making a similar argument, right? It's like, well, it's a sort of inevitable structural sort of thing that directs people, housing prices go up here. You were in Park Slope before, mm-hmm. couldn't afford to buy there. Where else am I going to go? Gentrification. And yet, how do you square that with these systems don't exist unless we participate in them?
Yeah. And it seems like there's just so few options for people of like middle income of all races, of all, if you're in like a middle income earning class of people, you're being pushed into certain neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods are largely, black and brown, and those, you're being kind of forced to participate in this system. Like, even if I wanted to, like, I can't afford to live in Park Slope. I can't even, can't rent there, let alone buy, or many other neighborhoods that are like white neighborhoods. So, it's, I guess gentrification for the win, like, I don't know.
You can go there, it's okay. They're cool. It's good. You go ahead, say what you want to say. Unburden yourself.
Yeah. I don't like gentrification. I think it's, I'm like mixed income neighborhoods for the win, maybe. But I would support that.
Okay, so you don't like the term. Would whiteification be better?
That's possibly even worse.
Okay, but you acknowledge it's, whether you sort of, the individual kind of, and I'm half kidding about the guilt, but I walk around with a lot of white guilt. It's cool. I'm fine with it. But I'm half kidding about the guilt, but nonetheless, you are, you moved into a neighborhood with not a lot of white people. You're now one of a growing number of white people. Mm-hmm. We tend to call that gentrification. We can call it, unicorn fairyland. But But do you, going back to what you said before, you're saying it's sort of not morally, you kind of were kind of saying it's kind of a morally gray, neither good nor bad. I want you to play that out a little bit more. Do you think there are, I mean, I guess for lack of a better word and for lack of being direct, do you think you did anything wrong?
Oh, I think about that all the time. When my husband and I were first looking for a place to buy, we were looking at townhouses at first, and we would go to these townhouses, the ones that we could afford in like way eastern Bed-Stuy, and you would go there, it'd be dilapidated, there'd be like 10, 12 mattresses in the various apartments, and you would see like kids' toys and stuff, and it'd be like, oh wow, if we bought this place, we'd be totally displacing like not one, not two, maybe 3 families, like, you know, a lot of adults maybe, and we just were not comfortable with that. When we bought our apartment, it was, you know, available because it was the woman who had lived there for many years had passed away. It was in a co-op building that had gone co-op in the 80s and was slowly selling off units when they became available. Usually that means when somebody died. And so, you know, we were like, okay, this is possibly the least worst way that we can participate in New York City real estate. And, you know, then like, you know, several months later, yeah, I'm becoming like more aware. I'm like, oh, you know, the woman lived in the apartment, but maybe she had adult children who had like lease succession rights. I don't know. You know, title cleared us, obviously. You know, it's like, you know, you feel trapped almost, like if you want to live in the city and you want to have a stake in the city and not be like held ransom to the rising rents that will totally price out like a moderate income family, buying property is the best way to do it. And you know, the only way that a lot of the middle class people can do that is in a rapidly gentrifying or about to gentrify neighborhood.
So you talked about in the podcast, and one of the things I wanted to ask you about is trying to at least be a better gentrifier.
Yeah.
I don't know if those are the terms in which you put it, but you work in sort of social activism and advocacy and social justice and trying to be an engaged, conscious gentrifier. Can you talk about ways, your vision for that?
Yeah, I mean, like professionally, I work at the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, and
We've heard of it.
I kind of we fight for civil liberties and civil rights, and I try to carry that over to what I, you know, do in my personal life. My parents were very involved in the town that I grew up in. My dad's a councilman. My mom's been on the library board. She's a public school teacher, and so I've always wanted to be very involved. And once we bought our apartment, I was like, we're going to be in this neighborhood for a really long time. If we ever came into a giant pile of money, I want to buy a house in Crown Heights. Like, I'm not, you know, that's where this is where I want to live. This is where we're going to be. And so I joined the community board. I joined our co-op board. I tried to get involved, and really, like, this is my first year on the community board. And so I really just tried to be a fly on the wall and listen to what people have been working on. The community board is like, they're very advisory, so things take a really long time to work their way up to, you know, action steps.
Unlike those
say.
hyper-productive library boards.
Oh, yeah. Well, the library board, you're basically like, oh, do we have money
all
to do
action.
the potluck? Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
But with the community boards, like,
Totally
you know,
dissing her mom.
yeah.
Asshole. All right, go on.
Yeah, with the community boards, like, you know, you get like basically like they're kind of like a function where it's almost like being a co-op board for your community. Our community board goes from Prospect Heights to Crown Heights to Weeksville, and so you're between like all of the city agencies that are supposed to service our neighborhoods and the people who live in them. And so basically, you just are a giant complaint board for when people, you know, are mad about. You know, the schools being not great, or the bike lanes coming, or the mopeds running down people on the sidewalk, and like the big rezoning things that are happening where people are trying to upzone and downzone and historic districts. So there's a lot that happens there, and I try to listen and learn from all of the, you know, the people who've served on the board for usually many years.
I applaud you. I went to a co-op board meeting at the Park Slope Food Co-op once and thought I was going to kill myself. So my last question is, I'm sort of in this vision you're articulating, I'm not joking, in your vision you're articulating, I was going to do it with some asparagus, just...
With the asparagus toast we had for snacks?
Anyway, at least it wasn't avocado toast, then you know they'd really gentrified the Greene Space. So, sorry, where was I? No, but you're articulating a vision of being a good gentrifier. I guess as a white person, not to out you, but as a white person walking around.
I'm fully aware of being white.
Yeah, it's cool.
Fully aware.
But can you articulate that distinction between good gentrifier, bad gentrifier? Do you think that's a distinction to be made? That if to some extent, you're right, it's just sort of forces within them. Have you seen bad gentrifiers? What do you think a bad gentrifier is? And do you think about what you could do to be even better in the situation you're now in?
Well, I think a bad gentrifier is somebody who kind of moves into the neighborhood with the knowledge that they're only going to be there for 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years, conducts much of their life outside of the neighborhood. They fill their prescriptions at the drugstore by their job, or they go shopping at the Whole Foods in Manhattan. They use the UPS store in some other neighborhood. And they just they live in Crown Heights or Bed-Stuy, but they don't really live there. And they just kind of float through like little butterfly hipsters. And I think,
can picture them. Keep going.
I feel like a better and meanwhile, just their very presence is upping the real estate values. They're probably helping their landlord turn over their building from rent stabilized units to market rate. I think it's like an overall negative. Plus, some people can be unpleasant when they're in their 20s. I think a good gentrifier.
I think everybody can agree with that statement, no matter where you live. Yes.
So I feel like a good gentrifier is probably somebody who's like, okay, I'm going to live in Crown Heights. I'm going to find the supermarket that is owned by somebody who's lived in this neighborhood for like many years, like my Met Foods on Nostrand Avenue, which I love. And, I'm going to go to this place. I'm going to, if I've got $100 a week or so to spend on like coffee or pastries or, little things, paper plates, I'm going to try to buy them all on my retail strip. For me, that's Nostrand Avenue. I'm going to try to keep my money in my community. I try to, say hi. I walk the same way to the subway every day. I try to say hi to people. So, I see the same guy 2 times a day. I'm going to know his name and I'm going to say hi. I raise my son, he's 2, to like say hello to people on the street and to get to know people in my building. Try to join some of the neighborhood institutions and see what projects they've been working on for many years, because, the neighborhood's not like a perfect neighborhood. And I want to see what people who have lived there for a long time are worried about and see if I can contribute any of my skills in any way that's helpful. And, I feel like that is a way to be a better gentrifier.
And maybe bring avocado toast to the meetings. We're out of time, unfortunately. I want to thank Elizabeth for a great conversation.